little different from the usual thing I'd tackle. What I'm going to attempt to do is give my general opinions on the RWBY show and the game that recently came out on Steam, Grimm Eclipse. Now, if you've heard about RWBY before, you've probably been met with some Marmite responses. In other words, people who love the show or people who flat out hate it. I'm leaning more towards liking it, though I definitely have some issues with certain elements.
I'm queen of the castle, I'm queen of the castle.
Before I give a brief rundown on my thoughts on the show, I feel it's important to give people who don't know a little backstory on the creation and history of RWBY. RWBY was created by Monty Ohm for RoosterTeeth Productions. After the show was announced, a fanbase was already on the rise, creating various cosplays and artwork even before the show had an episode released. He wrote and animated the show up until season 3, but tragically passed away in 2015. This, quite obviously, left a painful scar on the cast and crew, but they announced it would still be continuing as planned as Monty had his entire vision for the future of RWBY written down and discussed with other crew members. So, what universe did Monty create? Well, RWBY takes place on a world called Remnant, a world inhabited by creatures of Grimm. And if you haven't guessed already by some of the character designs and naming conventions, the show is influenced by the Brothers Grimm fairy tales, but the characters are all wholly original and only use these names as references. In order to combat the Grimm menace, students are trained as huntsmen and huntresses and use a substance called dust in order to make themselves and their weapons more powerful. Students are trained within Beacon Academy and are split into groups of 4, kinda getting uncomfortable flashbacks to a show that had a very similar concept. One of these groups houses our 4 central main characters, RWBY, Weiss, Blake,
and also Blake sounds better than Black Sideshow,
and Yang. Put them all together and what do you got? But that's just a theory! When I first started watching the show, I had a hard time enjoying myself. That's not to say I didn't find parts enjoyable, but if I'm doing this multiple times during a season, it tends to be something I drop. But I honestly saw potential in it, so I decided to continue and just brace myself. And you know what? I'm glad I did. It was leaning more towards being slice of life than high impact action, but spread throughout the first season are some pretty nicely choreographed fight scenes that left me curious to see how the show would improve. I mean, the animation goes back and forth from being great to slightly awkward, but those are things I'm willing to shrug off because I know making a whole show in this style is hard bloody work. By season 2, things were getting better and I could see the story was actually going somewhere rather than being based around teenage shenanigans and humour that really didn't hit home with me for the most part. I understand that comedy is subjective, and if you found parts in season 1 funny, then there's nothing wrong with that. But to finish off my point, it was kind of fortunate I managed to stick through with it, because season 3 was pretty great. I might come across as a bit of a hypocrite here, as I've previously said on social media that you shouldn't have to sit through 20 hours of a game, or in this case show, in order to get to the good parts. But if you're more patient with shows than games, I'd suggest sitting through season 1 as a rite of passage in order to reach the story progressing further than...
She's got a fire sword! Ow, ow!
Giggles aside, one thing is for sure. Monty had a vision and he tried everything he could to make it happen. The man put a lot of work and love into it before his passing, and something I honestly respect about the entire show, including season 1, is how passionate he was about the entire thing. Watching some behind the scenes clips only further proves my point, and you get the feeling that the cast and crew of the show work together as one family unit. Even if I disliked the show, which I don't, there's one thing I could never dislike, and that's Monty's dream becoming a reality that continues to inspire people. Go check out the show if you're wanting to watch something a little different, which starts off, in my opinion, a bit weak, but gradually becomes more compelling in the later seasons. Well, now that's out of the way, let's start talking about the RoosterTeeth adopted game, RWBY Grimm Eclipse. God, I feel so fucking mean in this video, I'm sorry. I didn't enjoy this game. That's not to say it was outright the worst thing I've ever played. It's just mediocre, and that's a damn shame. It was created by a fan named Jordan Scott and was later hired by RoosterTeeth in order to make it official. The fact he started making it himself is pretty impressive, but I don't think it should automatically make it void of criticism. I mean, Dust and Elysian Tale was made by one guy and is a much better experience, but that's not to say the game is without its enjoyable moments. Starting with the plot actually gives me a good excuse to discuss an issue I had right off the bat. Now, maybe I had my expectations a little high, but when I hit this, I wasn't expecting to just drop straight into the action without exposition or a cutscene. It just feels strange. You'd think they'd include a few animations and allow it to feel more like a show, but instead the story is delivered to us in text boxes. Emphasis on text! The plot goes a little something like this. Whilst out on a mission to see what the issue was with a few security networks, we run into a few strange devices that seem to be capturing Grimm. After fighting our way through a few ways, we come across a mutated Grimm, something which has never been seen before. It turns out that a mad scientist named Dr. Mallow is using a substance to mutate Grimm in order to save the world by destroying it. Look, I haven't seen this concept 10,000 times in games. Fuck! Anyways, we defeat his final experiment and he self-destructs along with his lab, thus ending the story. Wait. Rewind. My god. It probably sounds like I'm bashing on it a fair bit, but what frustrates me the most is how lackluster it all is. The potential for this game is huge, it just needs a few pushes in the right direction in order to make it a great character action game. If another one is produced, I'd like to see a lot more included and see the developers listening to constructive criticism. I mean, the gameplay started off pretty fun. It runs at 60 frames per second with a few frame stutters here and there, but moving your character feels nice and smooth and button inputs are quick and responsive. However, we're only stuck with a handful of combos till the end of the game. We can upgrade them, sure, but if you're stuck repeating the same combos again and again, it gets boring. Also, not being able to heal using items or let's say orbs that are dropped by enemies is a very odd choice to me. Take a guess how you heal. That's right, you have to run away and wait for your health to regenerate. Absolute pace breaker, and considering how a regular enemy can bring you into dangerously low health with just one swipe, it gets annoying pretty fast. It's like having the ability to lock on or slide dodge will automatically make the game slightly more fun to play, and considering how crazy the show gets of its techniques, you'd assume that there'd be a currency to purchase new moves and combos or even using skill points instead. Now I know you have access to 3 other characters, but all of them behave pretty much the same. They have a set amount of combos to perform, and guess what? It gets boring. Even when the game is 4 hours long. That's saying something. Something I neglected to mention was the game's use of multiplayer. If you want, you can play with up to 3 of your friends and have the whole RWBY gang fighting alongside you, which admittedly does make things a little more fun, but then again, I'm sure playing fucking Hugo with a friend will make it more of an experience. You can also counter enemy techniques by pressing B or circle if you're on a DualShock 3 or 4, where you'll dash towards them and cause them to be stunned. Doing this, however, usually ends up with you dashing from enemy to enemy, getting caught in a continuous counter loop. Veering slightly off topic, I want to take a minute to talk about Yang, who's coincidentally my favourite character in the show. Yang has an ability which I couldn't wait to try out whilst playing. Whenever an opponent attacks her, she can absorb the energy of the blow, allowing her attacks to become even more powerful, eventually becoming an unstoppable raging powerhouse. But sadly, this wasn't implemented in the game at all. Being able to control a berserk Yang would be fucking cool, but instead she has a few combos and a forgettable special move. I'm sorry, man. But speaking of Yang, as you can see here, they've got the art style down perfectly. What's good about this game is it feels like you're playing with the 3D models in the RWBY show, and they did a spot-on job with all the girls and the Grimm in this game. You get a pat on the back for that one, my friend. And why are enemy rushes in every single level? Having 1 or 2 of them in the game is at least passable, but having them at the end of every level is frustrating. Mix things up, my dudes. And then, to put a cherry on top, when you get to the final level and you're introduced to a final boss, this is where boredom leads to confusion and frustration. This boss is a joke. As you can see here, it has a set attack pattern that it executes in intervals. What it doesn't do, however, is attack you. I mean, sure, if you forget how to run, you might get hit by this thing, but look at this, I'm just running away and it's attacking nothing. In the original patch, its shell makes it invulnerable to physical attack, so you had to wait until its stinger impacts the ground, then smack it around like a piñata. So you run away, wait for it to attack nothing, then run in and win the battle. This is a bad boss. It's a bad fight, and it should not have been implemented into a game like this. So talking about the patch, I wonder how they fixed it. Oh, well this is fun.
Fucking isn't!
Now I have to take a moment to say that despite all of my negative comments, I still have great respect for a person who has the passion and the drive to make a game about something that he or she loves. There's nothing greater to me than seeing a passion project become loved and appreciated by thousands. However, my negative comments here are meant to be constructive with the aim to entertain my audience. If the developers of this game are watching, it would be fantastic to see a sequel or even a brand new game that serves as proof that they listen and respond well to feedback. I mean, they're adding more to the game later, such as Horde mode and Team Juniper as playable characters, but I get a strong feeling it will just clog the game instead of improving it, but I'm more than happy to be proven wrong. I paid £20 for this game, and I'd honestly pay half of that for the experience I went through. At best, I could say this game would be a good time waster for the fans, and as I've said before, the character models are virtually the same as the shows, and the voice actresses sound like they're having fun in their roles. But for a game that has been in early access for more than a year, I was expecting a game with a little more polish and a little more fun. Maybe throw your money towards another game on Steam that provides 40 hours of solid entertainment. Yeah?